Hello, welcome to Board Game Bonkers. I'm Jay Sears. Today we're going to take a look at Back to the Future Dice Through Time. This is a cooperative game where we're going to be taking items from a year that's been misplaced and taken out of the relevant year it should be in by Biv, and we're going to take those items and deliver them back to the correct location. That's right, we're going to use our DeLoreans, we're going to roll some dice to take some actions and try and trigger and find those items to then take back to the right location. So let's head to the table and see how it plays. I'll come back up top. I'll let you know my thoughts and my positives, my negatives. I'll give my final thoughts on the game, and then I'll give it a score out of 10. 10 being fantastic and amazing, being 1, well, absolutely atrocious, never buy that game. So head to the table, see how it plays. Here's a very brief overview and all the rules within Back to the Future Dice Through Time. So this is a general setup, a setup for 2 players. What you'll be doing is getting the board out, you put Biv out in the areas located by where this icon is here. And as you can see, you've got the standees. These are different years, as you can see indicated by here: 2015, 1985, 1955, and 1855. Going out of time tracker here, which we will need, is really key. If it ever reaches the end at 12, then you're out of time, the game is over. What your objective of the game is, you're going to try and get item cards back to the relevant location. And once you've done that, achieved that with all the item cards, then you have completed your mission successfully. Up here on the right, we have the Einstein tokens. Einstein tokens are really key. They're going to give you extra icons to use instead of a dice, which is really key. And you also have your little player board that tells you all your actions in the play order. And you've got our own dice. We've got some event cards here that should be drawn on a turn. We also have some additional tokens here. These are kind of time tokens. I'll explain how they work in a little bit later. But first, let's go through and explain how the function of this game works. Now, we do have a first player token. It's quite cool, this. A steering wheel. And the first player will take this. They'll take a player board and also take dice that matches that player board. So let's have a look at the player board. Now, the turn order, very simple. So the first player will then draw and place event cards. So we'll go through that in just a second. They'll then roll dice, then perform action. These are the actions from the dice that you've rolled. And then we'll advance out a time marker. I'll explain how that works in just a moment. We'll add paradox tokens. That is these time tokens here. They're called paradox tokens. I'll explain how that works in a moment, and then we'll pass the first player marker. So let's go through these actions first before I explain the dice actions and what you do on your turn, okay? So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to draw and place event cards. Now, the rulebook does a good job to vary the difficulty level, okay? So in the playbook, so we'll play a 2-player, we'll draw 3 event cards. If in the 3 players, it'll be 5 events, and 4 players, it'll be 8 events, making it much more difficult. But of course, you'll have more of your DeLorean cards out. So at the start of the game, I'm going to place them and start in the clock tower in the chosen year, which matches the colour of the DeLorean. So the first player, which is the pink, they're going to draw 3 cards. Really simple and straightforward. So I'll draw 3 because I'm in 2 players. I'm going to look at them. Now, any events that have yellow are immediate events. So it says here, after rolling, players may move each Biv to any location in his year. So for example, we immediately do that. So I'm going to look at, I can move each one. So I don't have to, I've got a choice. I can move this Biv here. I could say, I think I want to clear this. Maybe I'm going to move this one here. I'm going to leave the other 2 there. So I could do that, for example. The other event cards, where you place on the board, they'll have a year where you place them, a location. Okay, it gives you a bit of flavor text, and it gives you an icon. What you're trying to do is get to that location where this event is, to spend the die with that type of icon. That will then discard this event, and then you'll be able to collect an item card. So let's go through that. So I'm going to look 1985. I'm going to place this in the blacksmith shops here, and this one nice and blue so I can see which year it's in, and I'm going to look at the clock tower, so I'm going to place that there. Just as well, I move Biv, and I'll explain why that is important. So my next action, so I'm going to continue, I'm going to roll my dice. Really straightforward and simple. So with the pink player, I'm going to roll my dice, And there, well, we've got. So let's have a look at what the dice do. So I'm now going to perform my actions after I've rolled my dice. So I can spend to move to the same year location to any year. So for example, if I had that icon which I've got here, I could spend that to move my car to any year in the same location. So I could move, for example, to here because I want to try and cure and get rid of this event. So for example, I've moved there. So let's look at this next icon. I can spend to reroll any unspent dice of my choice. I haven't got that, but I could, for example, which allows me to spend any 2 dice of the same icon to then use as any other. So I can re-roll my dice if I had an icon. This next one, I can spend to use as any one icon on an event. So that's these events. So if I had that, which I haven't, so if I had this icon, I could spend it. Well, it's not Biv, and I could spend that and use that as this icon here if I wanted to. So this one, I can spend any die to move to an adjacent location. So I can spend the die to move to an adjacent location in the same year. I can spend to move to any location in your current year. So if I had that die, I could then move to any location. So I can move much further than just discarding one die to move one space. This one here is really important because that spends to remove any 2 paradox tokens from the board. These are paradox tokens. I'll explain how they come on to the board in just a moment. So let's spend our die. So I've already moved up here. Do I want to move again? Maybe not. Let's have a look. So I've got this die. It matches that icon. I've successfully completed that event. Fantastic. So what happens? Well, I've spent these 2 die. I have to knock and punch Biff down again. And then I'm going to take this card, I'm going to discard it because I've completed it. So that goes into a discard pile. I then collect an item card from the location year. Okay, so in this case 1955 and 1955. I'm going to look at that and it's going to tell me where I need to take that location. I'm going to return it, this item, to 1985. Now I can hold up to 2 of these. So I'm going to take that and then I'm going to place it on my board so we know we've got it. I've got to try and get there to that year. Now, as you can see, I need to try and move down again. So I've got this die. So what I might do is spend this to then move down here. That leaves me with 1 more die. This punch die allows me to punch Biv. Now, what's important, if Biv was ever on a card, an event card, you have to punch Biv, get them off that location before you can resolve the card. It's really important. So I've just moved, I've got 1 more die. There's not much I can do with that because Biv isn't there, but I'm in the right year, ready to go to Marty's house, which is here. So I can spend any die, remember, to move to an adjacent space. So I'm going to move here, and it's got to be in the same year. I'm successfully there. I've then completed this. This item card has successfully been returned to Marty's house. Fantastic, we discard it, we've completed that, and in return, I get to move out of time tracker back 1 space. It's not going forward, so that's fantastic. But if it were here, I can move it back 1, for example. I then get to take one of these Einstein tokens. So let's have a look at them. They're simply just the same icons what we'd find in the die, and then place it here, and any player can use these and activate them on their turn. So that's me completed. One important thing to note, that's when we roll a die, we do it simultaneously, all players do it. I showed you for the pink player, and I've carried out my actions. It'll then move on to the next player, which in this case will be this kind of brown colour. They will then roll their die and activate their actions. Once we've done that, we then advance out a time marker. So what does out a time marker look like? So in this scenario, let's say this was still here. We're going to look at the board, look at all the years, and we're going to have a few out just to show you the example. There's another one in Cafe 8. You can have up to 3 in the same location. And when you resolve any that have more than 1, you can resolve them all at the same time. And let's put a few more. We have got the end of taking our actions on a die. We're going to advance out of time tracker. We're going to look at the years and which has got the most events on them. That's when we move the tracker. So, for example, we've got 2 here, we've got 2 here, and got 1 here. These two are tied for having the same. What we do is we'll look at the most advanced year. In this case, it's this one, 2015. That's the one that will activate. We'll look at how many cards there are. This only counts as one in one location. Okay, so that'll move one space. It won't move two. We'll then look at how many cards are out here. If there are more than one, for example, in different locations, so let's just say there was one here and one here, we'll look at that and we'll take one of these tokens and we'll place it on. Regardless of how many cards are here, we'll still only place one. And what we'll do then, advance the tracker again, one more space. These paradox tokens, you want to try and get rid of them. And to get rid of them, if you remember, you can use your Einstein. That will get rid of 2 paradox tokens. We'll then proceed on to the next player. The first player token will move to the next player. And again, we go through the same phases. So that player will then draw and place event cards. All players will then roll the dice. All players will then perform the actions in turn order. And then we'll advance out a time marker. Now, a few important points to remember. So what you can also do on your turn when you're activating your die, you can leave a die for another player to take. For example, I could leave that there, but a player can only take it in a future year. So for example, if I was here, this is called a ripple effect. I cannot take the die because it can't go back in time. However, if I was here, I could take and use that die, and it's called a ripple effect. It's important to note you can only leave one die. If at any time that is still there on my next turn, I can take it back and use it in my roll. You can leave it, of course, for future turns. It's entirely up to you. What you're trying to do is trying to work together to try and create the types of icons to resolve the event cards, to then gather the items, to deliver the items to the relevant location in order to complete the game objective before the time marker reaches 12. Remember, whenever you complete and deliver an event to the right location, you go back one space, you get an Einstein token. The other thing, a few other important elements is whenever Bev is on a card, you have to punch him off. For example, if I was here, I'd have to use the punch item, or I can use any 2 dice, 1 icon. I can then punch and move Bev off to an adjacent location in the same year. Remember, when you resolve any event card, you must resolve them all at the same time in that particular location. For example, I need each of these locations. Any card that has this icon, so here we go, means that Biv needs to be placed there. So in this case, Biv would automatically move there when that card is placed out. When you've completed and returned all the items, then you successfully won the game. You can vary the difficult level by having more event item cards out, So for example, this is the medium mode. We've got 3 here. We can have it on hard by introducing an additional one, for example, or we can have it insane, which, believe you me, is insane. Let's have a quick look at the rulebook. The rulebook's pretty good. It explains everything really well, fairly straightforward, nothing too complicated, and it's only a few pages. So there we have it, Dice Through Times. Now, there were 2 Back to the Future games that were released pretty much the same time. This is Dice Through Time, and this is obviously a cooperative game. We're going to try and work together. Now, I'm going to talk first about my positives and what I like about this game. And the first positive is I really like how the time element works. So you've got these times in strips in the different years. I really like how it works with the dice activation as well, because you have 1 die that you can then move to a different year and that same location, so you can move through the years, and it works really well in combination with that ripple dice effect. So you can leave a dice in location and another player in a future year can use that dice. I really like how that works, and I think thematically it makes sense. I think they've done well with that, and it's a simple streamlined system. They haven't overcomplicated, they've made it simple. One thing I didn't explain in the overview was that an important rule: if you ever move to another location where there's another DeLorean, then you will be penalized by receiving 2 out of time spaces, so the out of time marker will move up 2 spaces. You have to keep that in mind. But I really like how that sometimes the decisions are, I need to move that location to help you, but if I do that, we're going to get penalised. So I really like how that works, but it's a simple, streamlined addition to this game. It works really well. The second thing I like is the dice actions. Now, I'm generally not a fan of luck, but I think it's streamlined really well in this game, and I think there's a lot of mitigation. For example, I can spend any 2 die to activate as an icon. So, or I can use a single die to move one adjacent space in the same year. So you've got different ways you can manipulate that dice, and you've also got one dice that allows you to re-roll the dice. So you could spend 2 dice of one icon to use that icon that allows you to re-roll the rest of your unspent dice. So I like how you've got some mitigation there, and I really like that ripple effect goes into my first mention of a positive is that you can leave a dice for another player to use in a future year so that you can work cooperatively together to figure out what you're doing. So I really like the kind of mitigation and use of the dice, and I think it works really well in this game. Now I'm going to move on to my third positive, and that is the general cooperative mode of this game. I really like how it works. It really does feel that, one, you're making your own decisions on what you do with your dice. I like that. It takes away that alpha player issue. And I really like that you're working together, figuring out, right, do I leave a die for you to use in a future year that you might need? The good thing is you can take that die back in your next turn, so it's not wasted. And I really like as well that cooperative moment, you're figuring out, right, how do we get to those events? Because we need to clear the events. If we don't, we're going to move up that time marker. The more event cards we've got out, keeping in mind any number of the same events are out in the same location, then that only counts as one, not several. So then you're figuring out, right, where do I go? Do we go there and solve that first? Or shall we go up to this event? Maybe if you go here, I'll leave a die that then lets you use just in case you need it to then I can then go here to solve. So there's a lot of this kind of back and forth. I really like the kind of element, it's not too much back and forth because you're also looking at what you're doing and what you've got to activate with your die. So I really like how that cooperativeness works and also gives a bit of, I'm now going to work on my own, look at what I can do with my dice without the alpha player telling me what to do. I really like that. I think they've done a great job with that, and they've done that balance extremely well. And I'm going to move on to my next positive. I like how the way the events cards work. So it's not just you're going to locations to pick an item card up to then take it to another location. Instead, you've got to resolve an event first before you can take that item card. So there's an extra step in the process, but it's a fairly straightforward step in the process. So I really like how the event cards definitely add to that difficulty. Now, I am going to come to a caveat with that in terms of the difficulties because easy seems more medium and medium seems quite hard. But I really like how you've got to solve the events. If you don't resolve the events, then you're going to go up the time mark, the time track. But then you're going to get paradox tokens. If you get paradox tokens, that's going to further increase the time marker. So you're really fighting to work out, well, I needed to get rid of these paradox tokens, but I also need to get rid of this event. And sometimes you want to go to certain years, perhaps where there's no item cards remaining, just to get rid of an event, because that particular year has the most majority of the events. You get lots of paradox tokens that are coming out, so you want to try and get rid of those event cards. So I really like that push and pull decision making you've got, and I think that works really well in this game. And the events really do pull into this, where if you've got more than one event in a single location, you've got to resolve all of the events, and you can have up to 3 in one location, which makes it extremely difficult. And you do not want to have 3 because it's almost now impossible to get all 3 out. So what you want to try and do is resolve them as quickly as possible. But every time you do it, you get an item card. And when you deliver that item card, you're going to get a bonus. I really like that. And I'm going to move on to my next positive, the Einstein tokens. So when you deliver an item card, you move down the time tracker by 1. Great. Now, you might argue and think, well, why can I only go down 1? Because the time tracker goes up significantly the more events you've got out there and paradox tokens. So when you've got that event delivered, you then get your Einstein token. You take the Einstein token, you put it on the board, there's spaces for how many you can have, and you can use them effectively as a die. So they work really well, and all players can use them, and they're fantastic, and they help greatly and hugely, especially when you've got 2 or 3 events in one location to resolve them all, because you have to resolve them all before you get the item card. So on that particular location. So that works really well, and I think they're very useful. Without them in the game, it would almost make it impossible to complete the mission. So I want to move on to another positive, and that is the insert. I think they've done a great job with the insert. It looks great. I think they've done a fantastic job. And I think they've made it really good, solid quality throughout, because these are not flimsy, these cards. The overall quality, these are thick. They've done a great job. The quality of the dice is fantastic. The rule book, yeah, it's not amazing quality, but it's simple and straightforward to understand and play this game. So I think they've done a good job with it. So let's now move on to my negatives, and I haven't got much to say. So I've got one particular negative, and that is the kind of difficulty. So they vary the difficulty by how many item cards you need to pick up and deliver. So I'm not a fan of pick up and deliver in general, but I don't get a sense of feeling like I'm just picking up and delivering, which is great, and I really like how this works. But when you've got the difficulty level and it's streamed, I think they've done that's a good way of doing it, and that should be my positives. But the negative is that easy feels more like medium, medium feels like hard, and hard feels like insane, insane feels like impossible. So we've played this with various different difficulty levels and struggled to complete the missions, and only once we've managed to complete the mission. It's very challenging, and that can be a positive, that it's challenging cooperative games, but it can also be a caveat because it feels almost too frustrating at times that you're not completing the missions because you're not be able to get all the item cards. But what you could do, and it is a positive, is vary the difficulty by taking item cards out to reduce the number that you need to then find and deliver. So I do like that, but it comes with a caveat, which is the difficulty is too difficult at times. And I think they could have maybe adjusted that ever so slightly, but that's just nitpicking. So let's talk about my other negatives, and that is just one other area, and that's about the colour choice. Now, I'm going to show you because the brown and the orange, for those who are colourblind, will struggle because these look too similar. And I think the element of colourblindness should have been taken into account with these, and perhaps they should have used perhaps black or something just to make it a little bit more distinctive in the colours. That's my only gripe. But overall, I'm really pleased with this game, and I haven't got much to say bad about it. I think they've done a great job to make it family weight. I think they've done a great job with the overall quality of it. If you look at the DeLoreans, I think they've done a great job even to introduce these into the game. They didn't have to. Sure, Biv has got standees, and they look like basic, but it works. It's a family weight game. It works really well. It's fairly streamlined. There's a couple of little rules to remember. But to be fair, once you know them, it's fairly straightforward. And literally, it'll take you maybe 15, 20 minutes to read that rule book and you're ready to go. That's quite straightforward. So I like that in the game. I really like what was quite cool as well is they've got a little flavour text here on the back of the board. I think that was a nice touch. So I think they've done a great job to keep this family weight. It's interesting. It doesn't feel like a dry pick and deliver. It's an exciting pick up and deliver with a time element and going back and forward in time. And I think it's done well to be streamlined in how it functions in this game. And overall, they've done a great job to keep this in a small, fairly small, family weight package. And it's a game that certainly ages, I would argue, 10 plus could play this game. And it's fairly straightforward and streamlined enough. So I think overall they've done a fantastic job. I'm going to be coming in at a 7 out of 10 for this game. It's a big thumbs up for me. I highly recommend checking this out. Now, there is obviously an argument to say that the other Back to the Future game is better, but that's for a different type of video doing any comparisons. But this standing alone, I definitely recommend checking that out. That's Back to the Future, Dice Through Time. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already done so, please do consider subscribing to the channel, and please give our videos a thumbs up. It's free to do, so please, we do appreciate it. And leave us a comment down below. What do you think about the game? Have you got anything you would like to add, and what do you think about the other Back to the Future? Have you played that, and which one would you prefer? Let us know in the comments down below. Until next time, take care.